Hey, what is up guys, MurganMan4 here, and today I'm going to be giving you my thoughts and opinions on episode 8 of series 12, The Haunting of Villa Diodati, written by newcomer Maxine Alderton and setting up the series 12 finale. So there's a decent amount of stuff to unpack in this episode. For the first half or so, it just seems like, you know, your standard individual Doctor Who adventure. But I don't think very many people were surprised that this actually did tie into the finale. I believe I mentioned at the end of my review last week, but in case I didn't, it was pretty well expected that the Lone Cyberman that was mentioned by Jack earlier in the season was going to be making an appearance in this episode. And even way further back, I think last summer sometime, it was rumored that there was going to be a Mary Shelley episode featuring the Cyberman. So even before we knew the Lone Cyberman specifically was a thing, everyone pretty much suspected that this episode was going to have a Cyberman involved somehow. And then when it came out that the finale featured the Cyberman, then people figured it was going to tie into the finale. In terms of promotion, they were keeping it a secret, but I think pretty much everyone already knew it was going to be a thing. However, I have to admit, I honestly didn't expect it to have this big of a role in the episode. I thought that it was going to be relegated more to the end of the episode, and maybe be more of like a side plot, but no, the entire thing revolves specifically around the Lone Cyberman, and I thought that worked really well. But I guess before we get to that Cyberman stuff, let's go talk about some of the stuff in the first half of the episode, and the stuff like separate from the Cyberman. Because even without the Cyberman, this is honestly a really strong episode on its own. It's a really good showing for Maxine Alderton's first outing for the show. And honestly, I think it's probably the best written episode of the Chibnall-Whittaker era so far. And yeah, it uses its characters really well. It's clever, it's funny, it's scary. It's just got a really good blend of all these different elements, and it just comes together really well. The horror elements are played very effectively. Even though we don't necessarily get answers to all the things, like even though we figure out later why the house is reconfiguring itself and why there's like, you know, flashes of a ghost type figure and stuff, we never really learn why like the skeleton hand comes to life, although that was a really creepy image and it caught me off guard when it first, you know, popped out. So that was kind of weird that we never really got an explanation for that. There was also these ghosts that Graham saw a couple of times. They specifically bring it up in the episode that, you know, we don't have a resolution to that, so I'm wondering if that ties into something else that we're going to find out in the finale. But yeah, there's stuff like that even though we didn't get answers to in this episode, so they kind of stood out a bit, they were still played really well and were pretty effective. The house reconfiguring itself was really cool. It really, I like the hand actually, but even more so, it really caught me off guard when it first happened, because, you know, I'm just casually watching the episode. Graham goes up the stairs, and then he comes out at the bottom of the stairs, and I'm like, wait, what? Because I knew this was going to be, you know, like a ghost kind of story, but ghosts aren't typically known for this, you know, reconfiguring stuff, so I'm like, oh, what is going on here? Because it lets you know pretty early on that this isn't a typical ghost story. I've also previously mentioned that the historical episodes of this era are really good, and this episode is no exception. We've got our historical figures, obviously Mary Shelley, we have Lord Byron, Dr. Polidori, Claire Claremont, and less so, but we see him later on in the episode, Percy Shelley. The only one that I knew about before going into the episode was Mary Shelley. I didn't know about any of the other ones, and we don't really learn too much about them, but they were all pretty entertaining characters, I think. I particularly really enjoyed Lord Byron and how he kept trying to like flirt with the Doctor and she kept shutting him down. I thought that was great. And it was also interesting to see these famous writers and stuff, just kind of like having a fun time. They're not, you know, doing their things that they're famous for. They're not actually writing stuff. Even though Mary Shelley is known for writing Frankenstein, and this is supposed to be like the night that happens, we don't actually see her, you know, in the process of it or anything. Now, it is referenced and it is kind of implied that the Cyberman gives Mary the idea for Frankenstein, but it's not explicitly stated, and I think that's probably for the better. And there's also a couple of uses of some of these figures' works. I can't remember what stuff belonged to who, but the Lone Cyberman at one point quotes, I think it was Percy Shelley. It was some of his works, and at the end there was also a passage that was being read by Lord Byron, and it's kind of being applied to the Doctor by the show, which I thought was kind of neat. But it was interesting that, unlike most of the other historical episodes of this season, the historical figures weren't that much of a focus. I didn't feel like I learned a lot about them. I didn't really mind that too much, but they were more caught up in the events of the episode, and the episodes weren't really about, like, Mary Shelley. She was just kind of, you know, present there. I also think that, for the most part, the companions were relatively well handled here. I feel like Graham didn't really get a whole lot to do, but Ryan and Yaz did a decent amount, and Graham did get to do some stuff. It's definitely one of the more balanced episodes with all three companions, even if it's not, like, the best. So I thought that was good as well. And I gotta say, some of the comedy with the companions was actually hilarious.
Oh, it touched me. Ghost, it definitely touched me.
Oh, Ryan, that was my elbow.
I knew that.
Despite being a more horror-based episode, it's probably got some of the funniest gags of the Whittaker era, I think, so far. It's just, whether it was the way it was scripted or acted, it was just played really well, and it just worked for me. But about halfway through the episode, this is when things really kick up another gear, when we discover that it's actually the Lone Cyberman that's behind all that's essentially the cause of all this. It's a really cool reveal too. We see this like ghostly shape out on the lake, and it's been mentioned a couple of times up to this point, and the Doctor deduces that it's some sort of time traveler trying to break through, and then it just kind of like shifts into the villa, and boom, the Cyberman is revealed, and oh, it's a great moment. I do kind of wish I didn't know that was coming, because, you know, that would have been a pretty cool, you know, shock, but even knowing it was coming, it worked pretty well. And I gotta say, this is definitely one of the best uses of the Cybermen possibly ever. I mean, I've not been shy about expressing that the show way too often completely misunderstands the Cybermen. They use them as these generic robot things that... The whole point of the Cybermen is that they are people. They're converted people, but they are / were actual living things. And the show just kind of, you know, treats them like they're robots. They're not. They're cyborgs. And to be honest, I think out of all the new series stories, I think Rise of the Cybermen / Age of Steel, and then World Enough in Time, and now The Haunting of Villa Diodati, I think those are the only episodes of the new series that actually get the Cybermen. Every other one just kind of falls flat for me. And yeah, that includes the Doctor Falls. Other than how Bill was portrayed in that episode, I think all the other Cybermen, they just really dropped the ball on that. But this episode explores something brand new that we've never really seen before with Cybermen, and that's fascinating. When you have an enemy like the Daleks or the Cybermen or the Master, you know, they're 50 years old or so. Cybermen, I guess now they're 54 years old almost. It's really hard to reinvent them and do something new with them and fresh and innovative while also keeping it true to their original intentions. And I think that this episode does this superbly. We have a Cyberman who isn't fully converted. They don't have their emotional inhibitor. It's an emotional Cyberman. Now, normally, the reason the emotional inhibitors exist is because people can't mentally cope with the conversion process. Their emotions, drive them insane, and then they can't function. But in this case, we have somebody who's able to, function as a Cyberman without it, because they genuinely believe, like the Cybermen do, that the upgrade is what's best. And it gives a whole lot of depth and complexity. I think this particular Cyberman, his name was Ashad, and we're later told that he was a father and that his children joined the resistance against the Cybermen, and so he killed them. That is some dark stuff, and this episode was not afraid to explore that or touch on that. This is a Cyberman who has chosen to become a Cyberman, which is, it's even, the Cybermen began because they felt like they needed to convert out of necessity, and then they forcefully converted everyone. This isn't someone who felt that like they needed to convert. They actively chose to. And the Doctor plays really well off this too. How she's kind of like figuring out what exactly is up with this particular Cyberman, and how he ticks and what he's after. So it turns out he's after this element called Siberian, I think, which has been sent back in time because it contains kind of like the whole history of the Cybermen, and I think they need it. The Cybermen need this Siberian to be able to recreate their army and basically win the war against the humans in the future. And so this Cyberman has come back through time to retrieve it. And all the goings-ons at the villa, all the house shifting and stuff, those are protective measures to prevent that Cyberman from getting the Siberian. And it puts the Doctor in a really tough situation because the Siberian has been implemented into Percy Shelley. He found it, and it kind of entered himself, and now it was stuck within him. And the only way that it could be released is for him to die. So the Lone Cyberman, his goal obviously is to retrieve the Siberian. He's going to find Percy Shelley and kill him. And I do want to say, in the process of finding them, there is some really neat moments. We got some wonderfully shot bits where we see some of the villa's servants. There's the maid who's taking care of Mary Shelley's son, and also like the butler, and they get killed. And the Lone Cyberman, he kills the maid and picks up the baby, and it's such striking imagery as he looks at the baby and says, "You will become like us." It's really unnerving. And that's what the Cybermen should be. They should be unnerving because they are us, but changed. That's what's so great about them. And that's the thing. That's what's so often lost when they're treated like robots. They lose that familiarity. That's what makes the Cybermen so effective, when you're reminded that they were like us, but they've changed. And they've become monsters. Actually, one of my particular favorite things about the design for this, actually, it's really cool all around. You've got like the scarred face underneath half the faceplate. You've got wires dangling about. One of the arms is missing its armor plating. I love that he just has the human hand, just like the original Cybermen in the 10th Planet. There's no glove or metal plating or armor covering it. It's just human hand. And later in the episode, when Mary is trying to appeal to his more human side, his emotions, he reaches out and touches her. And it's so effective. This is what the Cybermen are all about. And that makes me so happy. And, it's great. But, anyway, eventually, he does find Percy Shelley, and he's going to kill Shelley to get the Siberium, which, of course, the Doctor can't allow, because that would, cause really bad ripples and changes in time. But, of course, she also can't give the Cyberman the Siberium, because otherwise, the Cybermen will win in the future. And so she's put into this dilemma, which, of course, Captain Jack warned, the companions about. And you know what, I have to say, I saw someone online say that this would have worked better without Captain Jack's warning, and to be honest, I have to agree. Mainly because the warning doesn't add anything. It doesn't really... if you removed any mention of it, nothing would change. And it just kind of feels tacked on and like an unnecessary flab. So that's kind of disappointing. But the actual, decision itself is really great. And so the Doctor actually gets one of her most chilling moments. It shocks me because, she's normally really nice and, compassionate and kind to everyone around her, especially her companions. But she just kind of gets really cold here, where, Ryan's like, well, he's just one life, and what about all his other lives, right? Like, he can't just, sacrifice just one life. And the Doctor starts explaining to him about what about all those changes that's going to cause to history. And throughout the last couple seasons, they've been establishing that they're a flat team structure. They're all on the same level. And the Doctor just kind of snaps here and says, sometimes this team is not flat, and it's mountainous, with me at the summit, all by myself, all alone making the decisions. And that's definitely one of Jodie Whittaker's best moments. It's just chilling, and it's shocking, because it's not the kind of thing we've come to expect from this Doctor. And now she's been pushed into this situation. So she makes the decision. She saves Shelley. She is able to trick the Siberium into getting out of him. And she tries to, put it into herself so that the Lone Cyberman can't get it. At which point the Cyberman calls his ship to come in and start destroying the planet, which of course the Doctor can't allow. So she decides to let the Cyberman have the Siberium. And now it's put them in quite the tough situation. I love how the Doctor describes it, how, her plan was step 1, save Percy Shelley, step 2, fix up the mess I made in step 1. That's, classic Doctor, but unfortunately in this case it's really big scale with really big consequences if that can't be fixed. Obviously, it's Doctor Who. They're not just gonna, have the Cybermen win, obviously, but I have a feeling it's not gonna be without consequences. Something is going to happen in the finale, and it's not gonna be pleasant. And yeah, it's a great dilemma, and the Lone Cyberman gives Jodie Whittaker a great enemy to face off against and really show her full potential. And yeah, it was just, that last half of the episode, and even the first half too, without the Cyberman, is really effectively done. But especially the second half, I have to applaud it. Some of the best Cyberman stuff the show has ever given us, and yeah, that's great. Rightfully so. I've seen a ton of praise for this episode online, and it's probably the episode I've seen the most praise for and the least dislike for, which I think this is maybe the third time I've said that this season, after Spyfall Part 1 and Fugitive of the Judoon. So, Series 12 is making its way back up after Series 11. And yeah, this episode, it was a pretty great setup, I think. Now, here's the thing. Sometimes it's difficult what counts as a full story. I've decided that The Haunting of Villa Diodati is its own story, but it is a very thin line to draw. You've got other, stories like Utopia and the Sound of Drums and Last of the Time Lords, or Turn Left, The Stolen Earth and Journey's End. Both of them could be seen as a single-part setup with a, two-part main story, or they could be seen as an entire three-part story. Personally, I see the former as a three-part story, and then the latter as a setup with a two-part. And then there's also, the Face the Raven, Heaven Sent, Hell Bent. That could be seen as a trilogy or 3 individual episodes. Same thing goes for the Monk trilogy in Series 10. I think both of those are three-parters as well. But I think with this episode, it feels like it has more of a conclusion to, what's going on in this episode. It does lead into the finale, and there is a cliffhanger of a sort, even though it doesn't come right at the end of the episode. But I feel like it has enough, rounding out at the end to feel more like an individual episode separate from the finale, although it obviously is very closely linked. And so, yeah, I'm going to be counting this one on its own. And honestly, I think it's probably my favorite Whittaker Chibnall era episode so far. I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10. I thought it was really well done, and yeah, that was a very pleasant surprise, because to be honest, I wasn't expecting another 9 out of 10 this season. But coming up, we have the Series 12 finale, which has a lot of hype to live up to. We have Cybermen dealing with the Timeless Child, or Timeless Children, according to the episode 10 title. Hopefully the Master will be back. Hopefully Captain Jack will be back. We'll see how it all goes. Hopefully this episode as well is a very good sign for what's to come with the Cybermen in the next 2 episodes. Hopefully it doesn't, go downhill from here. And also, in the past, we haven't seen Chibnall deal with a story like this before, but what tends to happen with trilogies kind of like this is the setup is great, the middle part is usually pretty great as well, and then the last part just kind of... And yeah, well, we'll see how it goes. Hopefully it's better than that, but yeah, I won't be making a review specifically for Ascension of the Cybermen. I'm just going to make a review after both parts air and talk about both of the parts together as a single story. But yeah, so that's my review of The Haunting of Villa Diodati. I hope you guys enjoyed, and please leave your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. And yeah, Series 12 is almost over. We're at the end, and I have to say, I'm really looking forward to it. So, Murder Man 4, over and out, and I'll see you guys later.